I'm Tom's fiancée, the one that's supposedly the perfect match for him. But he fell for someone else, a girl who was struggling financially. And on our wedding day, he just ran away in front of everyone. All for her. He even cut ties with his family. This made me the laughingstock of our social circle, and I had to leave the country. 3 years later, I returned and saw Tom again. At a job interview at my new company, he showed up applying for an internship. When I got back, my secretary handed me a stack of documents. As I flipped through them, I stopped on one resume. The secretary quickly filled me in. This Tom might be a bit older, but he's from a prestigious university, has decent experience, and is asking for a salary below market rate. He's pretty savvy too. I was a bit stunned. The Tom I knew was full of himself. Even 3 years ago, he ran away at our wedding to elope with Sandy. After being caught, he was still defiant, ready to break ties with his family in front of all the elders. I'd rather be an ordinary couple with Sandy forever than live a fake life with someone I don't love. Those humiliating words made me feel so embarrassed. That day, I gave up on him completely, stopped his parents who were ready to beat him, and cried that I wouldn't marry him. The next day, I boarded a plane for a foreign land. Later, I heard Tom married Sandy, completely severed ties with his family, and vanished from the elite circles of City A. Staring at Tom's ID photo on the resume, he looked the same as 3 years ago but with some subtle changes. I looked away and closed the resume. He's not suitable for the assistant position. I thought by rejecting Tom's application, we'd never cross paths again. But just as my car left the parking lot after work, it was stopped. Sitting in the back seat, before I could say anything, my secretary in the passenger seat apologized to me, citing some personal issues, and got off the car to deal with them. I recognized them. It was Tom and Sandy. Unlike the confident man from 3 years ago, Tom was wearing an ill-fitting cheap suit, fidgeting with his tie, looking a bit uncomfortable. Sandy was arguing with the secretary, "You promised to get my husband into the company, but took our tea and didn't do a thing. Are you just taking advantage of us?" Sandy yelled loudly, pulling Tom beside her, scolding the secretary until her words got really harsh. "We're poor, but we won't be bullied. If you can't get it done, give us back the tea." The secretary, clearly annoyed, lowered her voice, ranting, "I agreed to help you out of family ties. That tea you gave was so old and moldy, it was embarrassing. And your husband here, how many jobs have I found for him over the years? But either he's scared of hard work or doesn't like the distance. Does he think he's some untouchable playboy? Too good for this, too good for that, living off women all the time." Tom's face was flushed red, wanting to leave but held back by Sandy. She pointed at the secretary's face, firmly demanding, "I don't care, you took advantage of us. Either you give back the tea or make it happen. Otherwise, I'll take this up with your boss." The secretary, at her wit's end, took out her phone and transferred $200 to Sandy. Sandy showed off to Tom, "See, these rich folks are all like this, always trying to take advantage, even just over $200. We can't let them get away with it." Tom said nothing, his face burning with shame. He used to be so influential, tipping tens of thousands without blinking, and now he's haggling over $200 on the street. Watching all this, I felt a bit nostalgic. With a calm glance, I rolled down the car window and asked the secretary, "Is everything settled? Can we go?" At that moment, Tom and Sandy both looked at me. Tom and I were childhood friends. Our families are prominent in City A, with close business ties. When we were 15, our parents decided on our engagement, planning to marry us after graduation. Tom was initially okay with it, treating me with utmost kindness. After we came of age, we assumed we were a couple, holding hands, dating, kissing. In passionate moments, he'd hold my hand tightly, confessing in my ear how he couldn't wait to marry me. But at 20, he had an accident in the mountains and was saved by Sandy. He found her lively, strong, free, and fell hopelessly in love. Again and again, he left me for her. Ultimately, for Sandy, he ran away at our wedding, turning me into a joke in front of everyone. Returning to the present, I met Tom's gaze, calmly. Long time no see. Things have changed, and I've moved past all of this. Tom didn't reply, continuing to stare at me, a storm of emotions in his dark eyes, wanting to approach but stopped by Sandy. Sandy's eyes were hostile, filled with cautiousness. I frowned, not interested in entanglement, and instructed the driver to continue. But as the car started, Sandy suddenly dashed forward and blocked it with open arms. A sharp break threw me forward, but before I got angry, she confidently questioned, "Jenny, do you still hold grudges from back then and that's why Tom didn't make it through the interview?" With everyone watching, I felt baffled. I brought Tom and Sandy back to my office. I sat in my chair while Tom and Sandy sat across the desk. Sandy clung tightly to Tom's arm the entire way, even while seated. Meanwhile, Tom was scanning my office, his gaze finally settling on me with a knowing smile. "All these years and your tastes haven't changed, still in love with the British design style." I frowned. There was something in Tom's tone, an indescribable familiarity, almost like before we broke up, when he hadn't humiliated me with that wedding escape, back when he spoke those hurtful, decisive words. I didn't respond to him and turned to Sandy instead, half-jokingly explaining, "The company is hiring a personal assistant for me who has to be on call 24/7. A married man like your husband isn't the right fit." I emphasized that Tom is married, and sure enough, Sandy's face went pale. She held Tom's hand tighter, hesitation flickering in her eyes. "I'm the right fit. I can be on call 24/7, Tom immediately interjected. "Just let me stay by your side. I can even live and eat at the company." His words were so blatant that not only I noticed, but even Sandy caught on. Her eyes welled up with tears as she looked up at him, feeling embarrassed yet gently tugging his sleeve, whispering, "Tom, it's just a job. We're not that desperate." "Shut up. Haven't you embarrassed me enough? If it weren't for you, I could have gone back. I wouldn't need to suffer here and stress over a job," Tom snapped impatiently, waving her off in a slightly aggressive tone. "Don't be jealous. What makes you think there's anything between Jenny and me? We're together by choice. Did you think you had a say in that?" Sandy's face turned completely white. She seemed to realize something embarrassing. I was shocked too. To my knowledge, Tom was never this cold to Sandy. On the contrary, he was always gentle with her, whether it's speaking softly or affectionately indulging her. There was this one time he took Sandy to a mentor's birthday party. She was nervous and clumsily fell into a 3-tier cake, ruining the event. Tom didn't say a word, he just gently picked her up and wiped the cream off her bit by bit. His unconditional love for her was intense enough to humiliate me back then. At the beginning, I didn't take Tom and Sandy's relationship seriously. In our circle, marrying for family ties is every girl's destiny. We carry the responsibility of the entire family. Even Tom's parents saw Sandy as a temporary amusement, letting her accompany Tom to less important events. I didn't hold any real grudge against her until she approached me at a party. I was chatting with some friends when she approached me with a glass of wine, blushing. "Jenny, can you let Tom and I be together?" she asked sincerely. Someone immediately snorted. "Jenny, Tom's little songbird isn't behaving, is she? Is she really asking you to step aside? Your engagement with Tom was set when you were 15. If he dumps you now, you've wasted years. She doesn't know her place, coming to Jenny to beg. Does she really think she's something special?" My friends defended me, laughing at her expense. "Do you know the families are planning a wedding? The engagement ring is a 10-carat one. Have you seen anything like that in your life?" Sandy was embarrassed, tears welling up, but she still stood her ground in front of me. Love can't be measured by money. I love Tom, and he loves me. We got matching tattoos instead of rings, we can't take them off. Looking at Tom now with the faded tattoo on his ring finger, his affection for Sandy seemed replaced by impatience and frustration. I suddenly let go of the past. So, love can't be measured by money, but it could certainly deteriorate with life's daily struggles. First loves change with time, becoming as bland as plain rice. In the end, I decided to take Tom on board because his mother called me, asking me to give him a chance for old time's sake, bringing along some promising projects from Tom's family. Out of consideration for these projects, I agreed. Jenny, you're so kind. If only Tom had realized this sooner, we wouldn't have lost such a good daughter-in-law, his mother said. I just smiled and ended the call, instructing my secretary to arrange for Tom's position as a sales assistant. Tom and I seldom interacted. The new company was just getting started, and I was busy. Once, a friend visited me at the office. Startled to see him, she approached me hastily asking about Tom's presence. What's he doing here, Jenny? You're not still into him, are you? I couldn't help but twitch at her words, feeling a mix of emotions. He meets the requirements and passed the interview. What's wrong with him working here? Do I still like him? Are you suggesting I have bad taste now? I thought. Over the past 3 years overseas, I've dated a few handsome guys without any secrets from friends, so she quickly relaxed, satisfied, and returned to normalcy. I knew it, no good horse ever backtracks, especially not for a bad one. I laughed, rolling my eyes, and got back to work. But she leaned in, all curious and gossipy. But I kind of feel like Tom's in this for something else. Just asked if you've been eating lunch from your office. Feeling a chill, I lifted my eyes at her. She hesitated for a moment, saying, actually, I've heard stuff about Tom. Since splitting with the Tang family and marrying Sandy, things haven't been great for him. I didn't really need her to tell me. I had an idea of their situation. Tom was born with a silver spoon, always having the best. But Sandy's family was poor, with a gambling father, a biased mother, an opportunistic older sister, and a loafer brother. The gap in their background was too large for Tom to feel it when he was successful. But once he lost everything and moved from a mansion to a rental, taking buses, squeezing into crowded subways, he might endure it for love. But eventually, it became unbearable. Plus, there's the complicated turmoil of Sandy's family. When Tom and Sandy first married, her parents treated him kindly, assuming he'd make up with his family and lift them. But as time went, realizing that was unlikely, they showed their true colors, demanding Tom pay back money and a $30,000 bride price. Tom left the Tang family penniless and had no choice but to work off his debts. Throughout these 3 years, Sandy's family constantly burdened him with their issues, from gambling debts to buying houses and cars. In fact, a year ago, Tom approached your parents, wanting to apologize to you, admitting his mistakes. But they threw him out. We'd talk about it privately, assuming he regretted it and wanted a way back home through you. But his family wouldn't have him back. Severing ties meant his brother took his place. And no matter how much Tom's mom pitied him, she had no say at home. I kept a neutral face, but memories of what Tom said when he got caught eloping came to mind. Back then, both families decided if Tom went through with the wedding to me and ended things with Sandy, they'd let the past go. Under pressure, I advised him not to act impulsively, telling him love and marriage are two different things. But he insisted, Jenny, you don't get it. I love her, I'll accept everything about her. As long as we love each other, nothing else matters. He was so confident then. But now, he wonders if he was just young and naive back then. Wasn't his love strong enough to accept everything about Sandy? Could their love really not handle all the ups and downs? How ridiculous. Honestly, I think what's happening to Tom now is karma. He deserves it for leaving you at the altar for Sandy all those years ago. My best friend saw I hadn't said anything yet and tried to lighten the mood and comfort me. Lowering my gaze, I smiled softly. What's done is done, let's respect fate. Since then, Tom's mom has been calling me a lot. Over the years, even though our families grew distant business-wise, they were always cordial, and Tom's mom had always been nice to me. While I was abroad, even on holidays, she'd prepare a gift for me and give it to my parents to pass along. So when she kept inviting me to her birthday party, I couldn't refuse. I just didn't expect to see Tom there. Tom showed up alone, wearing the same suit he wore for interviews. Even though he tried to dress up, he still didn't fit in with the other guests. It was like he didn't belong in that old circle anymore. Seeing this, Tom's mom wiped tears in private. That Sandy destroyed Tom's life. There's no place for him in the Tang family now. Sam, if it weren't for me pleading, he wouldn't even be here today, she sighed, holding my hand. She looked at me, then beckoned Tom to come over and said wistfully, "You two made such a lovely couple back then." Tom heard this and, unlike before, didn't resist. His face showed a bit of sadness, and he forced a small smile, staring straight at me, and said with some self-deprecation, "Who says it isn't true?" I felt a bit at a loss under his gaze. There weren't many guests, most were relatives of Tom's family. I don't know if it was intentional or by accident, but Tom spent the whole party talking about our shared past. Out of politeness, I kept a smile at first. But gradually, he drifted further down memory lane, recalling how at 15, we got lost in Paris together and I cried in his arms. At that moment, he thought about having to comfort me all my life if we married. And there was also that Swiss skiing trip. Tom. I interrupted, finally saying the words I'd wanted to all night. No one stays in the past forever. We grow up, we need to move on. Tom's face froze, like someone had cut off his air, and he fell silent. Maybe it was my bluntness, but he didn't say much after that. I never expected Sandy to show up halfway through the party. Sandy was at the door causing a scene to get in. Out of respect, Tom's mom didn't stop her, only shooting a glance at Tom when the servants went to bring her in. Tom's expression was ugly. Soon, Sandy arrived. She wore a washed-out silk dress all frayed with lace and held a plastic grocery bag. Seeing Tom, her face lit up with joy despite her nervousness. "Tom, you rushed out so fast this morning that you forgot the gift. I brought it for you." She handed over the bag as if it were a treasure. But when she saw me, her smile froze, and she gripped the bag tighter. "You don't need to bring anything. Just go back," Tom said as he pulled the dazed Sandy outside. But then, as if awakening, she explained hurriedly, "You said your mom wasn't feeling well and gets cold in winter, so I made this scarf from cashmere yarn. It's warmer than those brands." In their scuffle, the paper bag fell, revealing a bright pink scarf with a prominent LV label stitched on it. The room fell silent, everyone stared at the odd scene. Tom's face went from bad to worse. But Sandy, oblivious, picked up the scarf, dusted it, and shyly offered it to Tom's mom with hopeful, earnest eyes. "Happy birthday, Mom. I know rich folks fancy brands, so I stitched the logo on. You'll look classy wearing it." Someone couldn't hold back, and even the servants hid laughter behind their hands. Who would ever wear that out? The mocking in the crowd was painfully loud, turning Sandy's face crimson. She turned defiantly towards the mockers and said aloud, "This is from the heart. It may not be worth much, but our sincerity is priceless." There was no more laughter, but everyone's eyes were filled with disdain and sarcasm as they glanced at Sandy. Tom's mom lost her cool, pointing at him angrily. "See, that's the wife you chose. Tell me, does she hold a candle to anyone else? If you'd just married Jenny as we wanted, maybe we wouldn't have lost a son or face." Clearly furious and embarrassed by the fiasco at her birthday party, Tom's mom no longer cared if Sandy was around. Looking at me with hopeful eyes, "Jenny, Tom was wrong before. Now that you're back, could you give him another chance for my sake? You liked that scoundrel once." I was frozen in place, uncertain about how to respond. Her words felt like trying to drag me back into the chaos of 3 years ago, making me face all those judgmental eyes once more. I instinctively looked at Tom, hoping he'd help Sandy and end this ridiculous scene. But it seemed like he didn't see how embarrassed his wife was. Instead, he looked calmly at me and asked, "Jenny, can you forgive me?" Sandy broke down in tears. I frowned slightly, then turned to look at Tom's mom amidst all the gossiping eyes. Auntie, I appreciate your invitation to your birthday party, and since Tom's family has supported my new company, I've kept a job open for Tom. However, we're not involved privately. While I'm back in the country, my family has found a few good matches for me. That was all I needed to say. In our circle, a good match just means matching social status and character. Since Tom chose Sandy 3 years ago, he's been out of our circle, and any chance of an alliance through marriage was gone. Tom's mom looked upset, and it seemed she wasn't ready to give up. She unconsciously tried to persuade me, "Jenny, you know Tom so well. Even if he was confused these past 3 years, he's still our son. In the future." Enough of this. Tom's dad suddenly interrupted as he walked in with Sam, shutting her up instantly. Eventually, the whole drama ended with Tom dragging Sandy away. I didn't stay much longer either, and I left not long after with some random excuse. Before leaving, Sam apologized to me. "My mom's a bit out of it." He's 5 years younger than Tom, just 20 now, but already much steadier, with an air of self-assurance beyond his years. I smiled slightly and said, "Apology accepted. I hope this doesn't affect our company's project collaboration. In our circle, sincerity has a price." I let Tom go. The day he found out, he waited for me outside the company. Why? He was clearly emotional, his eyes rimmed red. I pursed my lips and told my secretary to go on, then took him to a cafe nearby. Sitting across from me, he seemed to calm down, but there was a mix of regret and a bitter smile in his eyes. I only just realized how naive I was before, chasing love and giving up everything important. "Tom, I actually admire you," I interrupted him calmly. "And I meant it. You were courageous enough to break with family for Sandy, to give everything up. That kind of fearlessness surprised me. But you missed one thing," I continued, picking up my coffee, finally able to speak about the past without bitterness. Looking him square in the eyes, I got straight to the point. "You had the courage to go all in, but you couldn't protect the one you loved. In the end, your life turned into a mess." Tom looked stunned as if he'd never seen this side of me before, calm, rational, almost cold. "You left me at the altar, made me a laughingstock," I shrugged. At the time, it was true, I became a joke in our circle. It gave me leverage to negotiate with my dad, to go study in a UK business school funded by my family. I wasn't the only child, I had older brothers, younger brothers. All along, the family's resources always leaned towards them. In the eyes of a wealthy family, a daughter is meant to marry and expand the family's influence and resources. Boys are the heirs. I initially got close to Tom's family not because I liked Tom but because I knew Tom was the best option in my list of marriage prospects. Similar age, good looking, first love, what could be better? At 15, with my nudging, our parents set up an engagement. If nothing unexpected happened, we'd have followed the usual path, graduate, get married, he would lead his family, and I'd be the lady of the house. But something unexpected happened. Tom fell in love with Sandy. "You eloped with her and were brought back, I warned you. There's a difference between love and marriage. If I were you, I'd marry first, build strength, and then secure my love." Tom's face turned pale. He looked at me and finally forced out, "You don't care? There'd be someone else if not you. You were just the best match for me then. I had to marry you due to pressure, but I planned it out. Be a facade couple for years, then ask for a huge alimony during the divorce, and it wouldn't be a loss for me. It's a shame. You were too romantic, insisting on being a normal couple with Sandy. I had to give you up. But thanks to your humiliation, I got the chance to go abroad to heal. I knew my family would quickly find me another match if I didn't act like I had to have you. Your decision helped me." I nudged his coffee toward him. "Tom, honestly, I don't hate you. Quite the opposite. I thank you for the opportunity to start my own company. Now I have more say in marriage alliances." Tom accepted his severance pay. Soon after, I heard from a friend that he knelt at his family's door, agreeing to cut off Sandy completely and willing to start from the ground up at the company. He stayed on his knees for 3 whole days until he passed out, and only then did Tom's father give in, granting him a 3-month trial period at the company. But his divorce wasn't going smoothly. Sandy refused to agree. She went to the company, made a huge scene, cried, begged Tom to come home, and in the end, tried to end her life by taking pills, needing an ambulance to get to the hospital. No one from Tom's family stepped in. His father made it clear that Tom had to handle this himself. So he didn't stop Sandy's wild relatives from causing a scene at the hospital, demanding he pay for their daughter's 3 years of youth. After her release, Sandy came to me. She wanted me to give Tom back to her. Amused, I said, "Tom and I are just former co-workers. Your divorce doesn't involve me." "No, it's not that. He came to see you, you talked once and then he wanted a divorce. Jenny, you're so talented and beautiful now. Why ruin my marriage? Your relationship was over ages ago, otherwise, he wouldn't have married me." Sandy's crying and shouting drew a lot of attention, so I had to call security to escort her out. "Sandy, Tom and I ended things long ago. So instead of bothering me, go deal with your own husband." As she was dragged away, my friend came over and couldn't help asking, "What's up?" Rolling my eyes, I replied, "Just running into delusions." I thought that would be the end of it. But a few days later, I became a target of online harassment. Sandy had taken the divorce drama online, twisting the narrative. She convinced everyone that Tom's divorce was entirely my fault. We were married for 3 years, and now he wants a divorce just because his ex is back in town. He used to love me so much, he gave up his fancy life for me, but now he doesn't care. In her video, she cried over her hardships, even presenting so-called audio evidence. I told Tom, instead of pestering me, he should go manage his man at home better. That was all it took. I became the enemy of women across the internet, the headlines sticking to me and Tom like glue. Looking at the steady stream of cancelled orders at my new company, I frowned and asked my secretary to call Sandy. "I'm giving you a chance to clear things up yourself." When the call went through, I got straight to the point. She sounded cautious, "Don't think I don't know. You want to get me talking so you can clear your name. I'm not falling for it. You're the one who seduced my husband and broke up my marriage. You're already so rich. Why can't you leave Tom alone? If you hadn't come back, Tom would still be willing to be with me." I realized talking reason with someone irrational was a waste of time. I listened calmly, "Okay then." Sandy had no idea how powerful the PR of a wealthy family could be. Overnight, all the negative news about me vanished without a trace. Instead, stories emerged about her being a mistress who had hotel rendezvous with Tom, knowing he was engaged. More importantly, I had kept surveillance footage and recordings from her last visit to my place. Once those were online, public opinion flipped. The insults turned into sympathy for me. Who wronged our talented heiress? She had her fiancé stolen and now faces false accusations. This is just unfair. Right? Now that the man she snatched doesn't want her, what? Blame the original wife for being too awesome? The backlash hit Sandy hard. The online outrage was brutal, turning her into a pariah. Meanwhile, Tom's divorce case went to court. In court, Sandy was reluctant to divorce, crying and fussing, saying their marriage was fine and just had minor issues. But Tom submitted years' worth of bills he had paid for the family and evidence of domestic abuse against him at the hospital. After several rounds, the court ruled for divorce. Unwilling to accept it, Sandy went to Tom's house to make a scene, but this time, Sam stepped in. Tom's actions over the past 3 months had gained his favor. Tom even voluntarily signed a deal waiving his rights to inherit company shares, putting his brother at ease. So, Sandy couldn't repeat her antics. She couldn't even see Tom as the guards kicked her out. Not long after, Sandy's family disappeared from a city. Trying to topple a giant in real life is nearly impossible. But that has nothing to do with me anymore. A year later, my new company went public. And with my own efforts, I brushed off the blind dates my family set up and found a man I was happy with. At my best friend's arranged marriage, I brought him along. At the reception, I ran into Tom again. Tom was remarried to Helen, becoming a stepdad to her 3 kids. She was 7 or 8 years older, but he was compliant throughout the wedding. My best friend gossiped with me, eyeing Tom from a distance. Well, it's not surprising. He doesn't have much of a reputation in our circles. And since he doesn't call the shots in his family, marrying for advantage was probably his only role. I listened, expressionless. Across the crowd, Tom and I made eye contact. He looked awkward, and I raised my glass with a graceful smile. Later, at the reception, he found me alone. Long time no see. Tom chuckled self-deprecatingly. He was back to his refined self, but more humble than before. He looked at me and paused for a moment, smiling wryly. You're really dazzling now, so much that I can't keep up. But I have to thank you, without what you said, I'd still be naive. I smiled knowingly. You chose to go back home yourself. Honestly, I admired Tom. For the sake of his family, he gave up everything, even signing away his inheritance to marry for the family's gain. Tom seemed like he wanted to say something, but his phone rang. He glanced at it, apologized to me, and walked away. I soon saw him with his new wife. She was demanding, and he was obsequious. Arranged marriages, even in wealthy families, are Tom's choice too. Smiling, I turned and walked toward the tall, handsome man I brought along. When I expanded my business overseas, I started dating a well-matched boyfriend. My parents were pleased, and more importantly, he was my choice, not from a blind date. When we got married, my parents announced I would inherit the family business. They had no choice because my brothers hadn't achieved as much in business as I had. Later, my friend, pregnant with her second child, got divorced. She was assigned 3 of my companies. You can't rely on men, women need to be independent. I'm proud of my friend, facing divorce with confidence. The night she signed the divorce papers, she invited me out for drinks. After a few glasses, she couldn't help but sigh, I really owe it to Tom ditching you at the wedding. If not, you wouldn't have had the chance to grow and become so outstanding now. I smiled, silent, holding up my glass. In the dim light with the pulsing music, I raised my glass to her, red lips curving up. Tom's escape route back then was my doing. I wasn't surprised by her shock. Originally, I planned to keep that secret forever. Back then, Tom was set on breaking up with Sandy and focusing on the wedding. But during a dress fitting, I placed a picture of Sandy in a wedding gown in the most prominent spot in the window. Soon after, Tom fled the wedding, giving me the upper hand. I made a clear-cut plan, marry Tom, making his family grateful and respectful, or cancel the engagement and push for my chance to study abroad. I said, winking at my friend, either way, it's a win for me. While flowers bloom amidst the mud, those nurtured with care are always the most vibrant.